What is up? It is the first week of 2021. Well, not the first week, but it's our first episode of Spotlight. Now, Spotlight is a series where we highlight a certain director or actor's career and then talk about their individual films and why we enjoy and love their work so much. So today we're talking about the one, the only Ryan Coogler, director of Fruitvale Station, Black Panther, in Creed, and he will be directing the upcoming Black Panther 2, which should begin shooting pretty soon, the next 6 months or so. Now, let's start off with his first film. He made this, I can't remember, I think it might have been right out of college,
Mhm.
$1 million film that was just a really, really, really small budget. It's called Fruitvale Station. It's starring Michael B. Jordan, who will be a common theme of these films. Nick, you saw this film recently. What were your thoughts on Fruitvale?
I heard of this movie and this story before the real life police killing of Oscar Grant, and I was intrigued because I was like, I know this is gonna end with his death. I was curious as to see like what like I haven't fully read up on who Grant was, so I was just kind of like, I wonder how they're gonna like build up to that event. And what I really loved was that the death felt like the death wasn't the priority, but what really impressed me and what really stuck with me was that the priority was the guy himself. Like they really went out of their way to like give you this portrait of this regular guy. Like um, did Coogler write the screen? He was also did he was he also a screenplay writer? Did he?
I'll get back to you on that in just a
Okay.
second.
Because the screenplay did such a great job in the way he shot it, like the very like handheld, like not really found footage, but sort of found footage way of just like shooting it. Like it wasn't about the guy who died. It was just about a guy in general, and I love just this down to earth like feeling. Like he's just a regular person. He's like, yeah, like he's trying to keep together like the family. Like they love each other. There's so few like of course like arguments, but they're doing their best. He's a father. He's a son. He's an ex-con, and you see him like I love like my favorite moments are the is my favorite sequence is actually the one where he's like preparing to like sell like drugs or whatever, and then he has a flashback to being in prison, and then like there's a shot where he's just like on the rocks at the ocean, and then he goes back and he's like, no, I don't actually have it on me. Like I love that little moment 'cause it's just him in his headspace, just him like um trying to be the best version he can be for all his loved ones. And I just loved how the death, like again, just the death wasn't the point. The death was a tragic incident that ended this guy's life, but it wasn't about like sometimes I feel this like stories, some movies like about like tragic events, like the event is like what we have to build to, and everyone's waiting for that particular event. And it's like trying to find like a comparison in my head, but like we're all like the death is not the point. They humanized this guy, they made him such a real like an even more real and easily connectable persona. And for that, like on a story level, that was great. Michael B. Jordan did a great job. And then just Coogler himself, like I just loved how he captured everything. Um, I'm trying to think anything else. Yeah, it's just like what a great down to earth film. Like it was like filled with like such like subtle personality and just a great like just human film. I'm really glad like talk about a hell of a debut. Like that was great.
And it's a 85-minute film.
Mhm.
Uh,
Very
an
cool.
hour and 25 minutes for a film is a short film. Not like a actual short film, but it's
Mhm.
lengthwise it's short for
Right.
movies. But I, he really showed a expertise. He did write the screenplay, by the way,
Gotcha.
and
Yeah, credit to him,
he,
credit to
yeah, the it's such a tight script, uh, and the pacing is so it moves from one event to the next, and it's kind of a letting you set in what his life was like.
him. Mhm.
It has that feeling of has a really great pace to it that keeps you engaged the whole time, and it's really heartbreaking because you get this idea of someone who is struggling with parts of his life being an ex-con, trying to deal with having a family and child and juggling everything that comes with that. And he's trying to make everything right and be a good son, a good dad. And, it's about who he was. And I think that's a really powerful thing of
Right.
remembering him for who he was as a person
Yeah.
and, showing the tragedy and how horrible it is what happened to him
Hmm.
um, when he's killed. And I think it's that mixture put together that really, really sells not both, and it makes you feel for him. It makes you more empathetic than I think a lot of. I have the same problem with you where I can't come up with films that do it like this,
Yeah.
um, that handle it. I feel like Coogler took such effort and care to handle this the right way, to make sure that it's about the man, and you make sure it's a specific person. You know what I mean? It feels so personal. You feel that personal connection, and I think Coogler does a really good job of that in all of his films, but Fruitvale Station especially.
I think and this will become a reoccurring film as you talk about Creed and Panther. Like he is so good at just capturing like the humanity in characters, like the down to earthness of characters. Like we're starting from a guy in San Francisco and we're going to transition to like the most technologically advanced nation in all of comic books. Like, but you never feel like one of them's like more unreal than another. They just feel like and like they just feel like honest, like down to earth people, and like that's just a credit to how his camera work, his writing. I think he had a hand in writing Panther and Creed too. Can you?
Yeah,
I'll check
yeah,
that. Oh, he did. Okay.
he did.
Yeah. So then, as a writer, as a director, like he's just so good at capturing that like inner humanity. And I guess that'll transition us to Creed then. Um, Came out like 2 years after Fruitvale, right?
Yeah, it came out in 2015.
That's crazy. Jumping from indie to the Rocky franchise, like that's a huge jump. You could go give your thoughts on.
Yeah, you'd be surprised though.
Mhm.
Creed is a mid-budget film.
Yeah,
It was made for 35 million, and for those of you that don't have a sense of what budgets are, like what's a low, what's a mid, what's a high budget. A high budget's anything over really, I'd say like 80 million.
hmm
I mean, you could say even lower is a high budget. But anything like 20 and below is a very low budget for a film. Anything in between like 21 and 60 or 70 is mid budget, and then high budget is blockbusters. Um, but this film has the feeling of a big budget film, uh, but it also has the intimacy of his first project in Fruitvale Station.
right.
And I want to talk about the directing first of the boxing scenes, because he has, I believe it's his first fight. It's the underground. Is it like the kind of underground
Yeah.
fight?
So yeah,
Well,
sort of.
he's still working. I can't remember what he works for, a law firm, maybe.
Yeah, it's like that very first like fight. I think that's like the opening scene, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the one take.
Hmm.
And that was so masterfully done. My critique with a lot of boxing films, especially older boxing films,
Hmm.
is they look fake.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, he's not pulling, he's pulling his punches there. It looks choreographed. It looks more like a dance.
Hmm.
This film is a brawl. Every time they get in the ring, it is a brawl, and you feel that. And I think what a way to set the tone than to shoot it from a perspective. The camera is the perspective, and it's dodging punches. You know what I mean? It's moving left, right. It's circling around. It's backpedaling around the ring, and
Yeah.
it's not stopping. I think that chaos and that constant attention that you need to pay when you're in the ring, he really brings that through in that first fight.
Right.
And I think he keeps that throughout the film in the second fight. But before we get to the climax of the film,
Yeah.
let's talk about the in between and the building of the characters. Now, this script was written by Coogler. It was written by Sylvester Stallone too, and it was written
Mhm.
by Aaron Covington. Now, Sylvester Stallone is directed to his best performance, I think, in his whole lifetime in this film. He's fantastic. His relationship with Creed, and Creed himself, he wants to get back in the ring. He wants to fight. It's all he wants to do. His mom doesn't want him to do it because he remembers what happened
Right.
to his father. Um, and Rocky doesn't want to train him either. But
Mm.
he comes around to it. And I love that scene in the diner where Rocky has his restaurant and, the slow reveal of who Michael B. Jordan is. He's Creed's son.
Right.
And I love the montage of the training. My favorite scene in the movie actually maybe the scene where he's running in the middle of the street. The score in this film is amazing. Um,
Ludwig,
and
what's his name?
Ludwig Göransson, I think.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did a great job. I think he's another reoccurring Coogler collaborator as well.
He is in
Yeah,
every single Coogler film. He's also done The Mandalorian. If you guys have seen The Mandalorian, he did the score for that. Um, in that scene where he's running and he has the people who are on their bikes just riding by, and it's just him sprinting. The score is booming. I mean, it's the ultimate like, let's go. Like he's ready to fight, right?
right.
Uh, I really think
Yeah.
he finds a great way to make you cheer, and he brings the spectacle to the film.
For sure, for
Um,
sure.
But I'll leave it to you to talk about some of the more intimate moments of this film and maybe some of the interpersonal relationships
I
between Tessa Thompson and Michael B.
Yeah.
Jordan's character.
Well, I just want to first talk just quick point about like the scale of the film because there's a lot of like The Dark Knight, for instance. The Dark Knight is a blockbuster film, but it also has like a lot on its mind in terms of like themes and like character. And I feel like Creed operates in that same. It's like, yeah, it's a Rocky film. There's going to be like fights and it's going to be like war in the ring for the title, but they managed to just capture so much about like legacy, about like what it means to like be your own person, like outside of like what came before. Um, I want to point to another one shot that happened. It's when um it's like their first day of training, and like Michael B. Jordan gets waking up super early by Rocky, and then there's like a one shot of them like traveling to the gym, and then it's like up the stairs, and he's like introducing them, and like Rocky's just sort of like talking. He's just talking about like what he's doing. He's kind of like, hey, look, if you're not gonna like commit to this, like tell me now so I don't waste my time. And I just love that um I just loved the intimate vibe of it all. Like it's early morning, there's not a lot of people out. It's just these two talking and the camera's following them. Great camera work, and I just love how again these are just like down to earth people. Even though it's Rocky Balboa himself who fought an indestructible Russian in Russia in Rocky Four, um, and like he still feels like a normal guy. And again, credit to Kugler just as a writer. This is like Stallone, like you said. I think this is Stallone's like one of his best performances as well. I'm very partial to his original Rocky performance, but yeah, like he was rightfully nominated for an Academy Award for this performance. He They just managed to again like bring him down to like not bring him down, but like they managed to bring him to this like new level of just he's a legend, but he's like a human legend. Um, I'm trying to remember what other ones. I think also stuff with like him and Tessa Thompson between Michael B. Jordan. There's a lot. There's one scene where he's like watching her perform, and just the way the vibe and the way it comes off, and it just feels like such a moment the two are connecting, even though there's like a crowd like around them. I just love how it came off. Um, yeah, it's just like a lot like The Dark Knight. Like it's there's like this big franchise film, but it's also like got way much more on its mind than just oh, like what if Apollo Creed had a son and like he's gonna become heavyweight champion too? Like no, there's like more to it than that, and I have to I'm as I'm talking it out, I'm realizing like wow, like Kugel's like just as smart of a writer as he is as a director, that he's managed to capture all this stuff. And Creed for me is one of my favorite films of 2015. I consider one of the best. I don't know how it is for you, but
Same thing.
all right. Yeah,
Yeah.
rightfully so. More people I feel need to talk about it. Like people don't give it enough credit for what it actually is.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I would recommend anyone to see Creed. Even if you're not a boxing fan, you could see Creed. I think still have a great time.
Right.
Um, and I like pointing out scenes that other like in the hands of a lesser director would seem cheesy or not work, but in the hands of a great director work. And you mentioned that scene where him and Michael B. Jordan and Tessa Thompson's character are both, she's singing up on stage and he shows up. And in a lot of movies, it'd be like the cheesy, like, oh, they're into each other type scene. But in this film, it feels really authentic, right? And it's those small moments that can either throw you out of the movie, like, oh come on, it's just another one of like these like stupid romances that just doesn't feel real.
Right.
uh and he makes it feel really, really authentic. And I love the scene. I love the, she struggles with her hearing. She has hearing issues. And I love that opening scene where they're bickering back and forth because she's playing the music way too loud and just doesn't care. I thought that was a great intro scene and a great way to go from there to them being in a relationship. Like the full 180 of it, I thought was really, really fun. Um, but I think this is a great film. It's an underrated film.
Yeah, for sure.
The directing's great. And to get to the final fight scene, um, this is tough trying to talk about a film I haven't seen in years.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's due for a
do we
rewatch.
want to? Yeah, it's due. This film especially is due for a rewatch. Do we want to spoil what happens in the scene because we haven't really spoiled anything so far?
Um, how? I'm trying to decide because it
Let's
is
just
supposed to
say,
be the director spotlight, but
yeah,
maybe just try and not like go like this is exactly
too
how it is.
specific.
Yeah.
The way the fight ends
Hmm.
is really powerful because they could have gone one way,
Yeah.
and I would have understood, and it would have made for a good film, right? I would have walked out being like a good film.
Yeah.
This was a really good film. But the way they chose to end it felt so much more fitting for the character, and it made it feel like a more complete journey. And there was like this understanding that you kind of left the film with,
Yeah.
that I think if they had chosen the other way without being too specific,
Mhm.
it wouldn't have landed the same way.
And like it was reflective of what the franchise itself did, but also felt like it was not like being like a cheap oh like you remember this, we did this again. Like I know the Rise of Skywalker or like some of the recent like this recent Star Wars movie fell a little victim to that sometimes with certain scenes, but like here it felt like it meant something. There was a purpose. There's a reason they like um I guess reutilized the similar, I guess I'm like trying to like dance around it, the similar context of how like what you're talking about. Like meant something. It felt like this was like the best and proper way to go. And um it was like the perfect exclamation mark to everything that it was like the film was like building towards.
Yeah. And I think to wrap this up, if you watch Creed and then you watch Creed 2,
Hmm.
you notice one's directed by Coogler and the other's not.
Yeah.
Um, and Stephen Caples Jr. does a very good job of directing the second one. Don't get me wrong; he's directing a new Transformers movie too,
Mhm.
coming up. But you can tell that Coogler has this extra kind of touch to it that brings kind of everything together to a different level,
Coogler
and brings
likes
a more personal connection.
Coogler likes to like just sit around with the characters and just watch them like just talk. Like yeah, like you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the restaurant scene, that was good. The scene where Tessa Thompson and Michael B are like just going back and forth. There's even that scene in the locker room between Rocky and Sylvester and Michael B. Like that, like Coogler just likes to just sit with the characters, which I think again just shows like what his priorities are at. It's not the next big thing, even though he's shown to be capable of capturing those big moments, but it's about the characters are first. That's the priority for him.
Right, and if your characters come first, your story will follow.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's really important to note that by making all these characters so important and their connections so strong to each other, when he gets in the ring, you
Hmm.
care that much more for him. Every punch that he's hit with, every punch that he throws, you care that much more because you've seen the personal connections that each character has with one another.
Right.
And I think that's the part that Kugler brings to the next level, and that's the part that when you watch Creed 2, you can see how it differentiates from the first Creed.
Hmm.
And it does a great job of making it. It's very much its own film, and I think it's the best film in the Rocky franchise. Hot take. Um,
Maybe
we'll
another
move on.
discussion video in the future.
Hey, I will debate that anytime. But we'll move on to his next film, Black Panther. Now, Black Panther may have been one of the most iconic cultural films of the year. Came out.
Yep.
It came out in 2018, right?
Yeah.
You could argue that it's almost more like Infinity War will forever be with us, right?
Yeah.
But Black Panther 2 brought something to audiences that we hadn't seen
I
before.
I will not forget how my school was when this film came out. Like people like who like there were people I knew who like didn't go to movies like in period, but they were like raving about like something like clicked in this movie. Like even when Infinity War came out, it was really was like only if you watched the Marvel MCU then you were excited about this film. Otherwise, like you were like you could have cared less. But like my school, like you like you couldn't turn like you couldn't like turn a corner without like running into someone like who had seen it and like loved it. Like um it really I would argue like it was the most like culturally important like at least the one with the most like ripples like in 2018 like no other film like everybody knew what Black Panther was and he pulled that off at like 32 years old. That's crazy. And like um he also arguably had one of the harder like balancing acts and like for like a Marvel film because it's like Ant-Man. Like I love the first Ant-Man, I do. And like but like it was a relatively straightforward like this is Paul Rudd's, origin story into Ant-Man, but here he had to establish like he had to establish Wakanda, he had to establish the history of like the last generation, he had to like establish like Claw, and then he had to like bring in Killmonger, and then they also had like the genuine like themes about like colonialism and like the impact and their place in the world. And there's like and this is one of the biggest casts in the MCU too, and he had to handle all of that. And like this was his first CGI film. It's like oh my god, and became a it became an Oscar winner. Like that's incredible. That's an incredible feat.
Yeah, and it deserves to be a Oscar nominated film.
Mm-hmm.
This film, I think, well, I think it's his, this is the crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther might be his worst film. And Black Panther is an Oscar nominated film and a deserving one. That's
Yeah.
how good he is as a filmmaker.
Mhm. Yeah, like if your resume and like there's like a consensus like oh like this was probably your weakest film and that weakest film's like Black Panther like that's an insane resume to
Right.
like walk out with.
And we'll get into I have my critiques with Black Panther, like a
Yeah,
very small critique. It's not a small, but it's a critique.
yeah,
The first two acts of this film are, I think, perfect. Like I would legit go that far to say they're almost perfect first
yeah,
two acts. The setup of the world, you get the vastness, you get the technology, you get the amount of detail they put into finding African culture
yeah,
and how they were going to base that into the world of Wakanda. The costume design was amazing. The setups, the the set pieces where they're on the side of that waterfall and they're fighting on a waterfall, and it's a tradition to pass the mantle from one Black Panther to the other where you can be challenged. All this lore that he brought in really felt like he built this really rich world that felt authentic on every single moment.
right, right. It,
And
yeah, you keep going. Sorry.
yeah, I just want to say he had a really difficult task of, like you said, building the world, but also making this massive world feel extremely personal.
Mhm.
And I think he did an excellent job of that.
Right.
But go ahead.
I no, just 'cause you recalled the first two acts, like the for me one of the best, if not the best, or at least my preferred like stretch of minutes in this film is when he's like there's the opening fight scene. You get his dynamic with Okoye and then with Nakia. They travel back to Wakanda. You then get his dynamic with his mother and with Shuri. Then like a few minutes later, like maybe there's like a gap in between, but like then he meets up with Daniel Kaluuya, and you just see him again, just like Coogler likes to just sit with his characters, and just that first few like minutes of him like meeting the characters and this diverse like in all these diverse roles, like I love just how much he was able to, and especially since this wasn't technically an origin story, the fact he was able to build up these relationships and be able to like, and this is also credit to the cast as well, but like the fact he was able to build up these relationships and like keep them like the foundation for as things got crazier crazier and crazier, like that was really cool. That was like I was really appreciative of that. And also like I'm assuming it's the third act. Your critiques start to yeah. I think we have similar ideas on it, but what I will say is that I love how the threat, like the big like the big stakes at the end was positioned as like Wakanda's thing. It wasn't like oh we have like a Death Star were about to nuke the world. It was just like Wakanda itself was at risk, and the fact they're able to play up the location as much as the people. I think that was like, I think that was a pretty cool. It was a pretty cool executed idea.
I did too. And let's talk about Michael B. Jordan's character, Killmonger, because I think Killmonger is. I thought Michael B. Jordan should have been nominated for an Oscar for
Mm-hmm.
this role.
Mm-hmm.
From the opening scene that they have, that's a flashback to 20 years before, right?
Yeah,
With
Sterling K.
both
Brown.
their Sterling K. Brown
Yeah.
and I'm trying to remember the name of the actor who plays T'Challa's father. It's not coming to me, but
I'll look it up.
yeah,
I'll look it up.
from the setup of that scene and Michael B. Jordan's character, Killmonger as a kid, all the way to when we get reintroduced to him. And you get this, there's this argument of that goes between the two of not sharing resources. And Wakanda's been isolated. And it's this whole thematic war of isolationism, like being an isolated country versus being a part of a global society.
Right.
And how where Wakanda fits into that, and how T'Challa as a leader has to decide what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this film is about T'Challa trying to figure out how he can be the leader of Wakanda.
Right.
You know, where does he stand and what does he want to do? And I believe Killmonger. No, I can't remember Killmonger's Wakandan name.
Mm-hmm.
But Killmonger changes how T'Challa looks at the world.
Right.
He realizes that while Killmonger is going about it in the wrong way, killing people, wanting to take over the world essentially by using the technical, like the advanced technology that Wakanda has, and T'Challa thinks that that's completely wrong and is very right to be so.
Mm-hmm.
He is also realizes that Wakanda has the resources to help so many people, and they don't. And he realizes that that's the wrong thing. And he sees in Killmonger not just an evil guy, but a soul that could have been helped, someone who could have been saved by, or could have been, you know, guided to a better place with the help of Wakanda and the resources Wakanda has.
Right.
And that's what makes the end, that final scene where they're at the UN, you know, that United Nations conference, so much more significant.
Mm-hmm.
Is that journey he goes on in how his perspective changes through a villain. Because how often does your perspective change because of a villain?
Right.
That is so rare, and it's so unique that I think it really brought a fantastic aspect and a different lens to Black Panther.
Right. Also have the name of T'Challa's father. The actor is John Caney. So shout out to him. He was definitely a very critical part to the story as well. All right.
One other thing.
Yeah.
T'Challa's relationship with his father and those scenes on, I don't know, is it like an astral plane? Is that what they call it?
Astral plane, dreamscape, something along those lines.
Right. Where he takes the heart-shaped herb, and there's the beautiful tree, and the Black Panthers turn into the former leaders of Wakanda.
Right.
It's really, to me, something that I love to see those moments in that interaction. But Nick, while I fix my camera, would you like to take it over, and what else you love before we get into the third act?
It's just they rightfully won the Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Ensemble, and like this is like and that's because they were the foundation amidst everything, all the crazy technology, all the crazy lore, even the little MCU, like, you know, wider universe hints. It was all about these characters and the combination of them, like, and the fact that he like was able to come up, like he was able to write scenes where they were like isolated. Like there's the one scene with Okoye and Nakia arguing after Killmonger assumed control, or stuff like Queen Ramonda playing off of oh no, what's M'Baku? Yeah, like M'Baku when they go to ask him for, like, again, they were able to like isolate these characters, and like, and the fact that they're all able to feel like, yeah, this makes sense. Like I know this character, like this is how it was. Like it truly felt like the movie was called Team Black. Well, the movie was called Black Panther, but it could, like, the protagonist was like the team. Like, it was still felt like these core characters.
Yeah. Let's get into the third act now. Now, the third act is where I have problems, and I think this film doesn't fall apart, but it doesn't stick the landing as much as it could. And while I think the very ending, that final conversation in the sunset
Mhm.
um, between T'Challa and Killmonger is a beautiful moment that connects to the beginning of the film and feels really poetic, and how in character Killmonger is with his beliefs. This is like a spoiler, but if you're watching the Black Panther part, you've already seen the movie.
Yeah.
Where he basically says, throw me in the ocean and bury me. I can't remember the exact line, but he says basically throw me
Yeah.
in the ocean with my ancestors that jump shipped rather than.
Yeah. I think you might have had it.
Yeah, it's something along those lines. It's just one of my favorite pieces of dialogue that so fits the character,
Mhm.
um, and that he doesn't want to be saved. He views himself as right to the very end, and in a way he is, maybe ideologically, but in execution what he's doing is wrong, and you really feel that. And I think that's the moment where T'Challa realizes what, he's taking the wrong approach, and Wakanda is taking the wrong approach.
Right. Right.
But into our problems with the third act, um, let's address the CG fest. Because there is a CG fest, and I really love all the stuff that happens above. I think the scaling is a little weird.
Mhm.
Uh, this fight is for Wakanda, and they're like 100 people. It makes you feel like there are like 200 people in Wakanda,
Yeah.
um, which to me was a little weird. But you can live with it. Um, was there anything you had a problem with that before we get to the fight down below on the
I mean,
subway?
like, I'm gonna not go too much on it just because, like, this is a director spotlight, not necessarily like a Black Panther review, but like, I don't know. I how do I best say this? There did seem there's a tendency in the third act to get like kind of lost amidst like which in comparison to like the final subway confrontation on in Fruitvale, any of the fights in Creed, like before those were really like at most the groups were like 5 people involved, but now it's like big scale like Lord of the Rings like battles going on. So I feel like just a little bit it like got just drowned out the classic like oh like here's a bunch of people who all dress the same relatively and they're all like fighting and it's like who's doing what, who's where. Um but I don't know. The last like few conversation bits again returning to the characters, returning to his core like cast, like I think that was able to help the film like stick its landing. Ultimately, I think that's how like I think that was able to help balance out like kind of the film like maybe like going a little too far in its action instead of like losing track of like what was happening.
Right. It's one of those things where being a Marvel film conflicts with being a really interpersonal film.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Kind of needed that
and
finale. Yeah,
yeah, I
a
mean,
Marvel mandate.
it felt like it was building to this really intimate moment,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes a while to get there
Right.
when this huge battle's going on. Um, and the battle's fine. I think it's really the scenes between, oh my gosh, it's not Nakia, it's Danny Guerrero's character.
Oh, Koye.
Okoye and the guard
Mm-hmm.
fight Killmonger. That scene's awesome. I will
Yeah.
stand by that scene is amazing. T'Challa coming from the helicopter, like that's a great image. That's kind of like one of those painting images, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, um, that you just kind of want to frame. But there's some stuff in between that just kind of doesn't flow correctly. The geography feels a little bit off of the fight scene. But it's good enough that I'm like, okay. And then they fall down onto the train tracks or whatever you want to call the Wakandan subway system, essentially for mining vibranium.
Right.
And I think this was probably because the film was released too soon
Mm-hmm.
and visual effects weren't perfect, but
Right.
it just didn't look good. The CG looked bad.
Yeah. No. it's like I remember I saw that in theaters and I was like, again, should probably start steering to the end because I don't want to like because there's a lot I could say about how it happened. I'll just say that though that like I remember seeing that in theaters. I'm like, wow, someone said, okay, yeah, this is good. We can send this out. Because I was just like, I remember like looking around at like my family. I'm like, everyone else is like seeing this, right?
Right.
And yeah, I think you said it best when you're like, what happens? Like Marvel Studios have a very large presence in controlling and how the movie goes, and like Ryan Coogler was able to get out this incredible vision for how the story should go. But then I think you also have to like pull back for that necessary like third act finale. I know like Patty Jenkins said something similar happened with the first Wonder Woman. It's just kind of like that. Okay, the studio versus studio kind of like butting in maybe like a bit too much, especially when you had such a good thing going for a while.
Right.
But
I
at
mean,
least
we don't know that's the case, to be fair.
fair, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. But yeah, no, I say it's just the classic like big superhero battle is conflicts and some aspects to like how everything else proceeded.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just a frustration in the lighting idea. When you have two people in black suits
Yeah.
shooting in a place where the background is darker than their suits, just lighting wise, is makes it really difficult to light. And from people I've heard about who work in CG, it makes
Yeah.
it really difficult to do the special effects for that.
Hmm.
Um, and while I like the choreography and the idea of the fight, and they're both at a on level bounds, and the vibranium suits don't work because of the train tracks, the thing that make the vibranium trains essentially go way faster.
Yeah.
Um, I love all those details, and I love the choreography and the final move and how it leads into the end. It's
Hmm.
just the CG was so bad that it just took me out of it.
Right.
Um, but I don't want to harp on the bad because this
Yeah.
movie it's a really really good movie.
Right.
And thematically, it is one of the strongest movies I've seen over the past years, with both really personal themes and then really big idea themes. Um, is there anything else you want to touch on this film before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. Like between this trilogy of films, I think we covered everything.
Yeah. We're excited. I know Black Panther 2 is about to go into production. He's working really hard on that script and probably in pre-production too right now. I can't wait. I can't wait for any story that Ryan Coogler really tells. I will be there on the opening weekend to see it.
Hmm.
But with that, that wraps up this episode of Spotlight covering Ryan Coogler, great director. Leave a comment down below. Rank the films in order that you like them, and what you think about each of the films and what you want to see him do next. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out.